Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Fiber for Breakfast. We're now in our 22nd episode of 2024. But before we kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco, the platinum sponsor for Fiber for Breakfast. You know, things are pretty quiet in Washington, D.C. this week as Congress is in recess for the Memorial Day holiday until June 3rd, when both the House and Senate return. The Fiber Broadband's next regional Fiber Connect workshop will be held this coming Tuesday, June 4th in beautiful Deer Valley in Park City, Utah. You know, Deer Valley is just an incredibly special place, especially in June. And I'm very excited about our amazing lineup of speakers. So please join us. You won't want to miss it. So that's on Tuesday, June 4th. And after Deer Valley, we'll be in Des Moines in Iowa on September. We'll be in Calgary in Canada in October. Albuquerque in November. And of course, the big granddaddy of them all, Fiber Connect 2024, is in Nashville, July 28th to 31st. This is the largest fiber broadband event in the world. And last year we set a huge record. We had over 4,000 people, and registration is 30% above last year so far. So this is going to be huge. Look forward to see you guys there in a few weeks, well, in a month or so. That brings us today's Fiber for Breakfast session with my good friend, Jeff Heynen, the Vice President of Research for Dell'Oro, who's going to discuss his latest research on cable's path to fiber. But before we formally introduce today's guest, I'd like to introduce David Norris from our team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thank you very much, Gary, and good morning to everyone who has joined us today. We appreciate it. Before I go over a few logistics, we'd like to just once again thank our platinum sponsor, Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco. Now, if everyone keep in mind, please, that all participants are in listen-only mode today. To ask a question, please type it into the question box located within the control panel on the side of your screen. We will have a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today's session, so please do ask your questions. We look forward to responding to those. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on FBA's website within 24 to 48 hours, and you can find that recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. And finally, at the conclusion of today's presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. Please take a moment to do so. We appreciate your input. With that, I will pass it back over to Gary to once again introduce Jeff and get us started.
Thanks, David. Good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week, our guest on Fiber for Breakfast was Peter Supino, the Managing Director and Lead Analyst for Telecom and Cable at Wolfe Research, a Wall Street equity analyst firm. And he discussed the fiber primer, growth utility or pipe dream. So Peter's research predicts that U.S. fiber subscriber counts will double over the next 10 years as the opportunity to sell into the market is much more profitable than it has been in the past. So Wolfe Research believes that the argument for fiber to sustain much higher multiples is really robust and growing stronger. So Wolfe's very bullish on how accretive fiber investment is. Today on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest is our good friend, Jeff Heynen, the Vice President of Research for Dell'Oro, who's going to discuss his latest research on cable's path to fiber. Jeff joined Dell'Oro Group in 2018. Gosh, it didn't seem like that's a long time ago, Jeff. I thought it seemed like just yesterday. And he's responsible for broadband access and home networking market, fixed wireless access infrastructure, CPE, and cable outside plant market research programs. Jeff expanded the scope of the broadband access and home networking areas to encompass fixed wireless, CPE, virtual CCAP, remote PHY, remote MAC-PHY. Don't you love all the cable terms? DOCSIS 4.0, infrastructure. And he has also authored numerous articles and white papers, and his research and analysis have garnered widespread citations in leading trade and business publications. Furthermore, Jeff is a frequent expert judge, and I think you're going to be doing some judging for us at Fiber Connect, and invited to speak at industry conferences and events. So with all that, welcome, Jeff. And for our audience, please type in your questions as we go, and let's jump right in. So I'll turn things over to Jeff.
Hey, thanks a lot, Gary. I really appreciate the as always, the opportunity to connect with you and to connect with the audience and present some of our research and perspectives on the cable and fiber and overall broadband market. So why don't we, today I wanted to just talk about And actually, this probably dovetails off of last week's conversation with Peter. And I wanted to talk a little bit about cable's path to fiber and what we're seeing in terms of the numbers with respect to the equipment investments that they're making in the context of where they stand today with broadband subscriber growth or the lack thereof, and also what's becoming an extremely competitive environment to add new subscribers and to grow their revenue base using their existing HFC plant. So let's go to the next slide. Actually, I'll dispense with discussing what Dell'Oro Group does. I think hopefully you're all familiar with what we do, but you can see and certainly find out all the areas that we cover. But for the sake of time, let's skip forward if we can. You know, no question about it. It's really tough being a cable operator in the North American market right now, especially if you're a tier one and you're facing increased competition, as I mentioned. No question, if you follow the reported numbers and the financial statements, you're seeing the largest operators reporting net broadband subscriber declines or the lack of additions. And a lot of that is due to significant fixed wireless access competition at the moment, but certainly also coming from the increase in footprint and expansion from fiber overbuilders. So in a market where cable operators have historically faced little competition, they now are facing significant competition and are having a difficult time keeping up and are certainly going to have to change their strategies in certain markets. In addition to that, and this is impacting all broadband operators right now, the housing market, of course, one of the biggest drivers for new subscriptions is people that move, and then also new housing starts. And both of those metrics are certainly at low points, although we are starting to see a gradual improvement now in housing starts, but still the mobility portion of that would drive new subscriber growth is still at a relatively low number and low volume right now. So that's, again, impacting everybody. The other thing right now is with the end of the Affordable Connectivity Plan, that's been impacting cable subscribers and cable operators the most. I think that Charter has discussed anywhere from 500,000 to 700,000. And, you know, as a result, all operators who have customers that have been on the ACP program are, you know, introducing new programs in order to retain those subscribers. And so we're going to see how that shakes out through the remainder of the year. Beyond that, as we know, cable operators are increasing their CapEx right now to support upgrades to DOCSIS 3.1. You know, Gary and I were just talking about still the limitations on upstream bandwidth that many cable operators have across a lot of their systems. And so they're working hard to do mid and high splits where they can in order to improve that upstream bandwidth to remain competitive and also to adhere to some of the requirements of 100 by 20 for BEAD, the BEAD qualifications. The other thing that we're seeing, and this is like hot off the press from yesterday, T-Mobile has done a phenomenal job, of course, of expanding its fixed wireless access portfolio and subscriber base, and now will continue to do so in more rural areas through the acquisition of US Cellular. In addition to that, you know, T-Mobile has always known that capacity constraints are an issue on the fixed wireless side, and so they're partnering with or acquiring Lumos for fiber to the home expansion, but then also doing partnerships with Sci-Fi, Intrepid Networks, and others that provide open access fiber networks to become an ISP and be able to expand their coverage of fiber services and take advantage of the branding and customer cachet that they have on the broadband side through that fixed wireless service. Let's go to the next slide, please. So there are some silver linings, though, for cable operators and for broadband providers as a whole. I mentioned that this fixed wireless access subscriber growth, and I think probably Peter mentioned this last week as well. We're starting to see those subscriber numbers level off in terms of growth. I mean, that's not to say that they're still not stealing away broadband subscribers. That's certainly not the case. However, the growth on a quarterly basis is starting to peak, and some of those capacity constraints in densely populated areas, even in some suburban areas, those remain unchanged. And so the fixed wireless operators aren't going to jeopardize the higher margin mobile subscribers and the performance of those networks to support those services anymore. As I mentioned, new housing starts are starting to increase gradually. And then for cable operators in particular, despite all of these headwinds, they continue to maintain increasing revenue per user. And there's still room for growth. And that's also good news for all broadband providers. People still continue to value their broadband subscriptions, and generally, and when they are satisfied with the value that that broadband provider is giving them, they stick and stay loyal to those providers, and that nets higher ARPU. In addition to the new services that all operators are trying to provide in terms of Wi-Fi connectivity and others. Cable operators are likely to get some BEAD funding for out-of-market expansion. We continue to hear more and more interest among independent cable operators as well as even ones. Charter really set a tone through the RDOF bidding process and their fiber rollouts through that RDOF process to guide cable operators' fiber expansion in those out-of-market networks. Let's go to the next slide, please. So all of those, what's happening now also for cable operators, there's a diverging path, right? They've used DOCSIS forever, and we still see the largest tier ones following this path of now they're doing mid and high split for DOCSIS 3.1, as I mentioned, to improve that upstream bandwidth. The next step for all cable operators is the use of DOCSIS 3.1 Plus or DOCSIS 3.1 Boosted. You may have heard it by many names, which is allowing cable operators to deploy a DOCSIS 4.0 modem, take the additional OFDM channels plus some software upgrades to an existing CMTS or deploying a virtual CMTS in order to deliver a theoretical maximum of 8 gigs down and then 1.5 gigs upstream to individual subscribers simply by taking advantage of those additional channels. So many operators are going to pursue that. It's the cost of a CPE upgrade. So it's kind of a no-brainer, and plus that puts in place for those operators planning to move to DOCSIS 4.0, it gets the CPE in the home, and when they upgrade the outside plant to 1.8 gigahertz or 1.2 gigahertz full duplex in the case of Comcast and perhaps some others, then they have at least the in-home piece all set. Now that second, the tier 2s and tier 3s and those that aren't part of that largest group of tier 1 cable operators, DOCSIS 3.1 Plus buys them time. It doesn't buy them time to get to DOCSIS 4.0 necessarily. It gets them time to start overbuilding and, of course, doing greenfield build-outs with fiber. And we continue to hear and talk to more and more cable operators who this is the path forward for them. DOCSIS 4.0 is an unlikely scenario for them. They are looking to build out their fiber networks to remain competitive in the long term. They see new entrants coming into their markets, and so they have to protect those markets. And they believe that fiber for them is the way to do that. So let's go to the next slide, please. Regardless of either of these paths that an operator chooses, there are equipment and technology updates that all of these operators are investing in today to improve the signal quality and performance of their networks. And you can see here, if I were to have shown you my forecast from about a year ago, these forecasts are a bit lower because I've extended the timeline for the DOCSIS 4.0 rollouts. Some of the larger deployments that Charter and Cox and Comcast, some of those rollouts are just simply going to take longer, I believe, than what we anticipated before. And that is, partially due to availability of many of the outside plant pieces like amplifiers, taps, and some other passives, and also just a simple issue of labor being able to get those new pieces of equipment installed. And the other thing that changes a little bit here is that impact of DOCSIS 3.1 plus. That will have the effect of extending the lifespan of the existing CCAP platforms, the integrated CCAP platforms. In some cases, it may hasten the transition to a virtual CMTS, where existing CCAP platforms might be maxed out in terms of utilization rates. But if we look at the investment levels, there's no question that there is value regardless of the path that you take in moving towards remote PHY, which is exactly what Charter, Comcast, Cox, Rogers, you name the large tier ones, even smaller operators are moving towards, because that gets them to digital forward and return, moves them away from analog optics and analog-based signals going out to these nodes. In some cases, these nodes are many, many kilometers away from the hub sites. Let's go to the next slide, please. So I mentioned this DOCSIS 3.1 plus initiative. I collect shipment data from CPE providers around the world. Ventiva, Sercom, Arcadian, Sajumcom, many others. And we're very keen on getting numbers from them on their DOCSIS 4.0 CPE shipments. And we started to get reported volumes late last year in Q4. And we continue to see a ramp up of those CPE now happening. And I expect those numbers to accelerate by the end of this year, primarily in support of this DOCSIS 3.1 plus application or use case. Again, it really makes sense for cable operators, and it allows them to get to a 5x1 offering in those areas where they've done a 1.2 gigahertz high split across most of their plant. So you can see that this is how cable operators are going to compete here in the short term, by rolling out these CPE and then gradually transitioning their outside plan, at least for the largest tier ones, to either 1.8 or 1.2 full duplex, depending on the availability of the amplifiers and other outside plan equipment. So let's go to the last slide. So the presentation is all about cable operators' path to fiber. And what I wanted to say here is that there is a long-term path for every cable operator towards fiber. Some are on that path and have already made that transition today, and those numbers are reflected here in some of these remote OLT numbers. Remote OLTs have become a preferred platform for cable operators who already have outside plant and are working in adjacent or to offer fiber in adjacent markets. A lot of these numbers from 21 and 22 have been driven largely by Charter's RDOF build out. And they will continue to use and rely on remote OLTs because they can put those into existing node locations. And those node locations typically have local powering. They also have already pedestal access in some cases, and so all the equipment necessary to support basically peeling off new markets or expanded markets from those existing node locations that may be supporting HFC customers today, but in the new markets will be supporting fiber. And so, these numbers that I'm showing here in my forecast through 2026, these also could be fairly conservative from my perspective. It really depends, again, on some of the adoption rates, as well as the timing of some of the BEAD deployments, as well as BEAD wins by cable operators that we're anticipating. And again, of course, continued RDOF build-outs on behalf of Charter and others to support fiber expansion. Suffice to say that there's no question that cable operators are in the mode of greenfield build-outs being fiber-based, and now because of some of the challenges that we discussed in terms of the overall market, in terms of competitiveness, the need to switch over to fiber for a long-term comfort level that they may not have with HFC, and also some of the challenges with getting their hands on outside plant equipment like amplifiers to support a full transition to DOCSIS 4.0. And then, the last point here, I mentioned the DAA transition for these operators. One of the most interesting things, I think, also that DAA, and particularly the transition to virtual CMTS, provides these operators is a software-based platform that does edge processing and can function as a VBNG. So the challenges that existed before in terms of managing subscribers and traffic flows, as you did historically, differently between a DOCSIS environment and a fiber environment, some of those things now get eliminated and centralized, sort of centralized in a single platform that's now software-based. And so it becomes easier for operators to begin to mix and match which physical media they end up using in their networks to support broadband services. And so that in and of itself will help to hasten the transition for many cable operators and their overall transition to fiber. So Gary, I guess I'll hand things back to you.
All right, well, Jeff, always tons of really interesting information. So let's just start with DOCSIS 4.0, right? I mean, last fall, all this hype, it's here, ramping out, and then all of a sudden, crickets. What happened?
Yeah, I think the reality of I mentioned these amplifier upgrades, right? You look at extended spectrum, which is what Charter's strategy is, right? Upgrading all their outside plant to 1.8, or a percentage of their footprint to 1.8, and Cox is following that same path. But again, it's not a trivial task to update all those amplifiers to support spectrum gains. Once you get it operationalized, it's pretty business as usual. However, we're still talking about some lack of availability of those platforms, and then there's still you have Broadcom still talking about a unified chipset, for example, that supports both full duplex and extended spectrum. So there's still, as much as the cable industry wanted to unify on a single path towards DOCSIS 4.0, there's still many moving parts right now that have a lot of operators, taking a step back. The other thing is, right now it's kind of difficult to justify for many operators when you're not growing subscribers at the moment, and you're facing a competitive environment, and so you've got to limit your capital expenditures at the moment, and basically show that you can regain positive net subscriber growth on a quarterly basis before the CFO is going to feel comfortable about signing off on a full upgrade and rebuild.
All right, so last week, Peter came on and just told us about how accretive fiber is and the ARPU opportunity. Cable's really figured out ARPU, right? When I look at the earning reports here in the last couple quarters, negative net subscriber adds, yet profitability going up. So losing subscribers, but the ones they got, they can really be able to sell them lots of stuff. Is that?
Yeah, and again, I think that's true. It's true in the case of all premium broadband services. I think we're in this interesting time where we've got this kind of notion that good enough broadband is okay, and for many households that's true. We've seen this before, where a new technology has come along and stolen away subscribers, and then we've returned back to wanting the best and wanting the best connectivity for the money that we're paying and getting the perceived value out of that service. And what the ARPU growth, even in an environment of net subscriber losses, shows is that for cable as well as for fiber, there is room to grow. And we're not even talking about adding on new services yet, really, like managed Wi-Fi, parental controls. That's still a drop in the bucket of all the potential new services that can drive ARPU even higher. So it's a good lesson for all these operators. Fiber is a good case in point. I mean, everywhere you go, I mean, look at AT&T's financial statements. Same situation. When they roll customers off of DSL and onto fiber, the ARPU numbers increase significantly. And I think that's the case for all operators with a premium broadband service.
So it seems like cable's in a great spot in that, I mean, really, we're just talking about 3 companies, right? Because everybody else, all the other smaller guys have already upgraded. It's the guys that have those legacy networks that are really struggling with the CapEx investment. But cable guys have done great on winning state broadband grants, right? And so everything that they're winning, they're deploying with fiber to the home. Is that right?
For the most part, yes, absolutely. Yeah, when they go out of market or they're going into adjacent markets, any type of greenfield build out that they're winning money for through capital projects or RDOF or any of those subsidies are generally fiber based.
So one of the questions came in, why do you think small operators won't go with 4.0 and opt for fiber? The cost of overbuilding fiber would be multiples of the cost of deploying 4.0, according to this question.
Yeah, I think, again, there's some, there's some challenges with the component suppliers, right? There's a joint development situation with Broadcom, and providing access to the largest providers. I think there are going to be many smaller providers that feel shut out from that and won't get access until the tier ones are, taken care of from the DOCSIS 4.0 perspective. And so it's going to be a question of timing for them. If there are competitors with the fiber offering encroaching on their territories, they're going to have no choice in some cases but to bite the bullet today. And maybe that just means upgrading to high split and doing DOCSIS 3.1 plus. But I do think 3.1 plus buys them time, but for many of them, if they're in a market where they've got competition with multiple fiber providers, they're going to have to follow suit, bite the bullet, and go ahead and upgrade. And a transition to DAA gets them a step in that direction. And then certainly they'll weigh the costs of what all the amplifier upgrades and taps and other passives that need to be upgraded versus overbuilding with fiber and the operational cost reductions that you get out of that.
So isn't it any of this upgrades just a moot point? Because if you're a cable operator in all new greenfield, you're doing fiber. Anywhere there's competition against fiber, you have to do fiber. So you're really only talking about your non-competitive areas. So, I mean, so. Is that right?
I mean, you could say that, but I think certainly the tier ones feel that even the DOCSIS 4.0 upgrades will keep them competitive with fiber, and certainly if they're pushing 9 gigs down and 4 or 5 gigs up, those numbers certainly are competitive with what fiber providers can offer. So it's really hard. You can have 10 different operators in the room and get 6 or 7 different opinions on their approach, and it's all unique to the competitive environment. It's also unique to the age of the plant. There's still plenty of DOCSIS 3.0 and even DOCSIS 2.0 CPE that are still out there waiting to be upgraded, and operators that are still operating at 850 and even less in their plant. Those are the operators that maybe these are the ones that start talking about the fiber upgrades as a far incremental step than having to replace amplifiers and nodes to get to 1 gig or even 1.2.
Well, Jeff, I could talk to you all day about this. It's super interesting, and I really appreciate you taking time to come on Fiber for Breakfast, and just great research. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and I look forward to getting back together next Wednesday. We're going to have Bill Hogue, the CEO of Gigapower, that big joint venture between AT&T and BlackRock that's deploying multi-gigabit fiber networks to new cities. So this is going to be a great opportunity to hear what Bill has to say about what they're doing. So not going to want to miss that. We look forward to seeing you guys next Wednesday, and look forward to seeing everybody in Nashville, July 28th at Fiber Connect. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.